I was walking by a pile of boxes that I've had in the same place in like one of the storage rooms in the studio for a while now. And it occurred to me, why is it that I could just walk by this stuff over and over and over and never notice it? Like, what is it that makes me notice certain things? For example, in a mix or something even that somebody said, they could be like, you said this. And if I know for certainty I didn't say that, that bugs me. Why can't I let that go? And then why can't I let go things like, the storage room being messy or my desk that I work at having wires all over the place? Or like, why is it that certain things are totally okay with me and then other things that are super detail oriented aren't? And I was curious, is it a creative thing? Is this something all musicians experience? Because I had a theory that most creative people, musically creative people, have a very similar thing going on where we focus on whatever our brain decides to focus on and we ignore the rest. We literally don't see it. It's not that we're trying to be messy or we're trying not to clean up the boxes or we're trying to, not focus on something that most people who maybe work a typical job or maybe aren't, musicians or artists or creative, they just have a tendency to be disturbed by those things and want to change them, right away. Whereas, for whatever reason, our priority could be working on something we're doing and we have to finish it. And, all world could break loose and just be in, the whole place could be in a disaster where fireballs are being thrown all over the place. And like, we wouldn't even notice because we're just trying to make the snare sound good. What is it about people like us that ignore things that are so obviously problems? Because what I found is that it sometimes trickles into what we're doing and we still ignore it until it becomes overwhelming or it gets brought to our attention by someone we somehow trust to let in to what we're doing, because we have a tendency to dismiss a lot of people when they say, you should do this or you should do that. It's like, if that's got nothing to do with what we're focused on, it's so easy for us to just ignore it. We don't listen to everybody, right? But in some cases, when we let someone in who says something, we may actually do what they're saying. And let me allow you, allow me to say something to you that might seep through. All right. My desk was a disaster up until like 2 days ago. I basically, when I moved into this new studio, I took a bunch of the stuff I wanted. I had it on my desk. I had wires and hard drives and like the little screen for the clarity and the little screen for the Trinov and, just basically not using any of the wire management built into the Argosy desk or anything. Just kind of plugs going everywhere. All right. And I had someone at the studio who basically saw that and was like, man, you could clean this up a little. It looks like a carnival back here. And, they weren't wrong. For some reason, what they said, I let it seep in. And I spent like the next several hours after they left cleaning up all those things and kind of trying to organize the desk. And I did this despite the fact that while I was doing it, I was like, this doesn't matter. I have things I need to do. The time is ticking. I got to do it. I wasn't really thinking it was of importance. And as soon as I was done, I can't tell you how much there was an importance to doing that. There was something that trickled into my brain that made me think, now I'm more organized. I liked the way it was appearing now. It just looked cleaner. And it allowed me to somehow come up with a solution that worked in a mix I was working on that made kind of just perfect sense to a mind that was open and clean and clear rather than, it's a great analogy for where I was in this particular song I was working on, where I was kind of in the middle of something that was a mess of different things that were created to solve a problem that nothing worked. So I kept compounding the problem and it kept getting more and more like a spider web and more messy. And as soon as I cleaned up the place and got the wires situated, I was just like, you know what? This is a convoluted way to do this. And then I spent about an hour cleaning up the mix and getting back to a place where now I can work more easily. Because whether it's you working on your own stuff or something sent to you that's a mess, if you decide to work on it from the point where it's a mess, then you're now dealing with all these ridiculous, maze of stuff going on that you might it might be hurting you way more than it's helping you. You might actually be painting yourself into a corner when you think, I'm going to take it from here because then I at least won't, change the sound too much or undo whatever they did. But for me, it was like I was being hindered by where this thing was. So I needed to clear it up because it didn't really matter what it sounded like if I couldn't figure out all this ridiculous routing. I wasn't ever going to be able to solve the problems I was hearing. No matter what I would try to do, there would always be something else coming back to me that was like, why is this still there? Why is this not fixed by this? I mute that. It's still there. It's not. Where is this other reverb coming from? Like, it was ridiculous. So I basically had to break it down to nothingness. And then I started again. And the first, like I said, it took about an hour to clean that up. And then it took some time, part of the hour, maybe a little more, to sort of build back to the sound that I felt they were going for. And then I took it from there. But at least at that point, I was able to, because it was all untangled, I was able to see everything clear. My brain was clear. I knew that if I made a move here, it's going to affect this. If you don't get your mixes in a position or whatever you're working on, in a position where it's clean and clear and easy and untangled, it's impossible to get to the end in a way you're going to be happy with. You're always going to be thinking, man, I did as good as I could, but I hit this wall, and that's just the best we could do because of yada, yada, yada. And what I'm saying is, if you get the yadas cleared out of there, then you actually have a chance of being more happy at the end, because at least it will be as good as you can do, and that will be your only roadblock, as good as you can do in your room with what you're hearing, how your ears work, how your monitors are working, like at that moment in time. Not all that plus, if it wasn't all tangled all to hell, I would have been better. So it was just I noticed such a parallel. My desk got clear. Then I realized I have to clean this up to make it just as good as the desk makes me feel now. And then once I did that, I was able to get to the end goal. So, I preach a lot, work in this fashion where you know what's going on. And it's not always the simplest way in terms of always put effects on the tracks. It's not always like that. Maybe the answer is to keep the track completely uncompressed. One version of that gets to the mix bus uncompressed, and then another version of it can be compressed and blended together with the uncompressed version on a different track. So in other words, you have compression in parallel with your clean signal, and sometimes that's a better answer, and that might seem a little more complicated than just putting a compressor on the track and then playing with the mix knob or something. But in reality, it's not, because you have more flexibility over what's going on when you don't do it directly on the track. So what seems like it might be the simplest, most straightforward way is not. It's actually like you're actually doing some sort of a shortcut that hurts you in the end. So that's why I'm always a fan of doing things that you don't have to do again if you run into a wall, or that you can change easily without changing other things. In other words, a big plus to using a parallel channel that's, compressed with your vocal channel that's uncompressed is, if you don't like the way the parallel compression sounds, your first move could be to switch that compressor. And that will have nothing to do with any other stuff you have on that channel. So it doesn't change your de-esser. It doesn't change whatever you might have on the track itself. Your tuning, your de-esser, maybe you have some sort of saturation, a devil lock, a decapitator, or whatever you got. It won't change that. It'll just change the compression. So by separating the two into the track and how that gets to the mix bus, and then a compressed version of this track that's coming to it with de-essing on it, with maybe some EQ moves to tame out some nonsense that hurts, and then that also gets to the mix bus, that compressed version, then you don't like it, you switch the compressor. Maybe you do like it's not giving you enough, so you just do another channel with a different compressor right next to it. There's so many ways you can use tools like this to manipulate what's going on, and if you don't have to chase your tail, in other words, now you change the compressor, well, what'd you have after it? Did you have a saturator after it? Well, now that's gonna change, but it doesn't have to if you put it where the saturator's on the track, but the compressor isn't. So there's so many ways to think about this, but I like to think, what can I do where I have the most flexibility to change stuff if I need, and it won't affect other things, so I'm not chasing my tail, and the simplest possible way once you've included that beginning part. It's not just the simplest possible way, and you still have to chase your tail if yada yada. It's the simplest possible way that you don't have to. To me, that's the key to keep from going around in circles. And it's also the key to get to the end where you're happy. Because I can't tell you how many times I'll suffer through something the way it is because that's how I got it sent or whatever. And then at the end, after I've done as good as I can, I basically mix it again with everything untangled. So what I'm saying is just avoid all that nonsense and just untangle it to start with, and you're probably way better off. When I've done that, I don't usually have to go back and do it again the way it was sent to me. That's not what usually happens. Whereas when I do it the way it was sent to me, all tangled, and then I try to untangle it after and I compare the two, the untangled version is 9 times out of 10 better. So I'm just saying, there's reasons people work in the way they work. Figure out what works for you, and on the next one, if you guys want, let me know. I'll basically give you the most basic beginning of a vocal template you could have. If you don't have a vocal template, you're trying to build what you like on vocals, I'll give you an easy way to kind of start that, because there's no right way, but we all need some help sometimes. The basics are super important. You go back to learning the basics, sometimes you figure out the answers to the not so basic stuff. So I hope you guys like it. Throw a comment in there, hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.